sometimes you have to make some sort of prediction of the truth. We like to say at Safegraph, we predict the past. We're actually predicting the truth because you don't always know. You have holes in the data.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Data Scientist Show. Today, we have Auren Hoffman. Auren is the CEO of Safegraph, the place for data about physical places. He is the former co-founder and CEO of LiveRamp, the largest middleware company that connects marketing applications. Previously, Auren served on the board of Brightroll, acquired by Yahoo, was chairman of Stonebricks Group, CEO of BridgePath, and CTO of Kyber Systems. That's quite a journey, probably the longest intro I've ever read. And it's not over yet. Auren is an angel investor in over 120 tech companies. He holds a BSc in Industrial Engineering and Operations Research from UC Berkeley. He is the creator of DaaS Bible. DaaS means Data as a Service, and host of World of DaaS, a podcast for data enthusiasts where he talks to business and tech thought leaders about all things data. He is also very active on Twitter at AUREN Auren. Welcome to the show, Auren.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
On your LinkedIn profile, you said you were a math nerd. Can you give us an overview of your career journey, especially what was the transition like from being a math nerd to engineer and later founder and CEO?
Well, yeah, I'm just always very interested in things like math puzzles and things like that. And in high school and college, I was particularly interested in any type of like math puzzle or any type of probability analysis or so that kind of gravitated me to data. And so thinking about data was always it's always fun and challenging and enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. And what made you want to build Safegraph?
Well, Safegraph's a data company, so we only sell data. We don't do anything else. So we sell facts. So it's pretty rare to build a company that just sells facts. Most companies maybe are around data, or they have some sort of data at their core, but they're selling some sort of core service or an application on top of those facts to help people make decisions. At Safegraph, we only sell facts. So that's it. We literally sell facts. In Safegraph's case, we sell facts about physical places. So if you want to know about like the local McDonald's on 555 Main Street, you come to Safegraph and we give you the data about that. And so it's not that many people can use facts. So most of our customers are core data science teams or machine learning teams, maybe a core engineering team or a core product team. Those are the types of people that can actually take facts in and make them useful. But the vast majority of business users need some sort of application. They can't just buy facts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And also you, in your profile, you said you're chief historian. What does that mean?
Well, data is really, really about history. So it's really about what happened in the past, not what happened in the future. So, and ideally, the most important thing with data, as with any type of fact, fact is something that happened, is something that's true, and data is the same thing. So, ideally, the veracity of your data is really important. And most data companies, they have billions and billions of facts that can't be 100% true. Like that's impossible. But you want to be as close to 100% as possible, especially when you're selling to data science teams, because what data science teams do is they take your facts and they're putting it in some sort of data science model. And if your facts are wrong, then the errors are going to compound really, really fast in the model. So, if you start timesing 0.9 against each other a lot of times, you're going to get to a really small number really, really, really quickly. And a lot of data is not even 90% true. A lot of data companies out there are like 40 to 50% accurate. And 40 to 50% accurate is actually fine if you're selling to an individual. Because an individual, let's say you're selling to a real estate broker or something like that, an individual can disambiguate the facts pretty quickly and they can kind of understand what to trust and what not to trust, et cetera. So imagine like if you're looking at restaurant reviews on the web, right? You have some sort of understanding of what's good, what isn't good, et cetera. You can disambiguate that pretty easily as an individual. But if you're actually putting that into a model, then you really need to be much, much more true. If you're putting that into a model, because now it's not no one's looking at that data. That data is informing some sort of core decision let's say you're making a lending decision or something like that off of the data, then you really want those facts to be true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And as a data scientist, I know that it's very hard to have like 100% accuracy for the truth of data, like you mentioned. I read your DaaS Bible, so you talked about accuracy versus coverage. So when you try to validate your data, how do you know when is good enough, when is accurate enough?
Well, I mean, it is a never-ending thing, and data can be good. Certain levels of accuracy could be good for different use cases, and different use cases are going to require different levels of accuracy. And then also certain levels of coverage are going to be good for good for different types of use cases. And sometimes it's an inverse relationship with one another. So sometimes you need more coverage and lower accuracy. Sometimes you need higher accuracy and lower coverage. Sometimes you need both. So it really depends on what you're going after. And so depending on your product, you might go after different types of markets. So when Safegraph started, we were extremely high accuracy, but pretty low coverage. So we went after a certain niche markets that could benefit from that. And then over time, we got better and better coverage, but we didn't want to compromise on the accuracy. So we decided we were going to be the super high accuracy solution. And maybe we're going to trade off a little bit on coverage over time. But of course, you always get more, you can have more coverage over time if you work on that. That's just something you have to put a lot of effort into getting more coverage. Other companies in our space maybe have erred much more toward, okay, we're going to do a much more higher coverage, but maybe we're more willing to have lower accuracy. Mm-hmm. So everyone has a different kind of go-to-market motion.
Yeah. So it looks like it's case by case. And can you give us some example? What are some cases where you definitely need high accuracy, but it's okay to have low coverage?
Well, any case where you're like really informing a very, very core decision, and you're building a lot of different dependencies on that data, then higher accuracy is going to be more important. So I think like things like if you were making a lending decision or a buying decision or if you're putting a lot of money on a particular thing, I think you're gonna want a very, very much higher accuracy. For instance, a simple use case that you use Safegraph data for is where should I put my next store? And that's often like a multi-million-dollar decision. Mm-hmm. And so you want to have pretty high accuracy to make that happen. Where you want maybe a little bit, where it's okay to have a little lower decision, maybe like a marketing decision. So marketing might be, where should we spend some marketing dollars or something? And data is probably only a small portion of what goes into marketing. A lot of marketing is also about like the message that you have and a whole bunch of other stuff. And so, if you're targeting, let's say you're targeting gender on the internet or something like that, it's pretty rare to find a gender provider that's better than 70% accurate. So let's say it's 50% better than throwing darts or something. Mm-hmm. And that's good. That works pretty well on the internet. In most other fields, you're going to target on, let's say you target on like age or income or something, you're going to be, roughly 10, 20% accurate or something. That's still more accurate than throwing darts usually. And that will probably work fine if you're just kind of like spreading some sort of marketing message where the cost of being wrong is just showing someone a little bit of a wasteful ad or something, but there's not that many costs beyond that being wrong.
Yeah. And what is the process for you to fact check data?
Yeah, well, certain facts are easier to check than others. And so if we have a data, the classic data that might be very, very simple that Safegraph has will be the store hours of the local McDonald's. Mm-hmm. So this particular McDonald's on 555 Main Street opens at 7 a.m. on Tuesday. This other McDonald's at 454 First Avenue opens at 6 a.m. on Thursday or something like that, right? And that is something that is like fact checkable, right? So now it's hard to check. If you have billions of data points, you can't check all of those data points, but you can take a few thousand and check them and see how well you're doing against that. So you can actually have humans check. You can see how well you're doing. You can see, okay, on store hours, we're doing really, really well. But on another attribute, maybe we're not doing so well and we need to get better at. Or we do really well for restaurants, but we do really poorly for big box retailers. Or, so you can have different, and then, okay, well, why is that happening? And you can start to go into your algorithms to try to figure out why it's happening in particular areas. So you want to basically be grading your facts all the time. And we are grading them both ourselves. So we have a whole system where we grade our facts and then we check how well we're doing all the time. And then we also have customers that grade them. So we have a lot of customers that are giving us feedback all the time about how we're doing. And our customers are very loud when we're wrong. And of course, if you have billions of facts, you're going to be wrong all the time. And so then we take that data in, and then hopefully it gets better and better and better over time. And one of the nice things is when you correct a fact for, especially when you're building these things programmatically, when you correct one particular fact, it could potentially update 10,000 other things, or so these are living algorithms that as you get feedback, make everything a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. So it's a combination of human fact checkers, and you have algorithm to detect whether there's any outliers, and you also take feedback from your customers.
Yeah, you need to do everything. So it's a never, and you should never stop, because the thing about facts is that they change. So there are certain things about, like, if you think of a fact about an individual, there's certain thing about an individual, like the date you were born on, that doesn't change or something. But so many other things about you change. If you think of, like, marital status can change multiple times in your life, or did you have kids? You do not have kids, or your income changes all the time, or and the same thing in our case, we have data about places, physical places. So even if your store hours were right before, it was open at 7 a.m. on Thursdays, in the future that could change. And in COVID, things like store hours were changing every single day. And even in normal times, store hours actually change a lot more than people think. Even places themselves change. So if you think of a person, an average person, might live over 80 years or something like that. So it lives a pretty long time. The average place, like the average restaurant or something like that, is about 9 years in the United States. So you're just going to have a pretty high turnover. You're going to have, over 10% turnover every single year in the number of places that are happening. So they're starting, they're stopping. There's a lot of different kind of different things that are happening in your data. So even if you were correct a day ago, does not mean you're correct today. Yeah.
I think that's very important also for data scientists to verify our facts. A lot of things we believe are assumptions. And after a while, we need to also examine that assumptions and to see whether something changed, because the model were trained on the old data, but when it was developed in production, it's dealing with a completely different, not completely different, but sometimes very different distribution.
Yeah. And by the way, and you may have exogenous events that really change. So in COVID, like the models really, our business really took off in COVID. So it really, really accelerated our business. And one of the reasons it accelerated our business is a lot of people thought this type of data doesn't really change that much. It's not that accurate. It doesn't matter to be that accurate or something, because it's just kind of, once you have a model, it's kind of steady state. And it was changing a lot pre-COVID, but it wasn't in the zeitgeist. But once COVID hit, everyone realized how much this stuff is changing and how much really having really accurate data mattered.
Yeah. So how do you adapt to those changes? For example, specifically to COVID-related data sets.
COVID is just showing that data can change really, really quickly. Again, something like a store hours changes. It always changed a lot. People forget how much it changed. Store hours are always changing constantly all the time. And like no restaurant actually even is open. It's pretty rare that most restaurants are open the same time every Thursday, because on Thanksgiving or on Christmas or other days, it may be open on different types of times, right?
Yeah.
And so you can't even have a model that says on every Thursday it opens at 7 a.m. because that may change just by a whole bunch of other different factors that are happening. So these are pretty complicated ecosystems. And then in COVID just showed that it could get a lot more complicated. So there's a lot of things in COVID where you had stores that were changing their store hours. You had stores that were just closing for a whole month.
Yeah.
You had restaurants that were takeout only but you couldn't go in. And so there's all these different data things that were happening and still are happening. We're still living in an environment where there's constant change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you have a lot of geospatial data sets. Can you share some use cases of geospatial data?
Yeah, well, there's the great thing about being a data company is also the downside about being a data company is that you have many, many, many different use cases and you have many different types of customers. So when you're selling an application, let's say you're selling a billing system for dentists or something like that, it's pretty easy to know your target market. Okay, they're dentists, and we're going to sell the same thing to the same person, and we're going to go do that. When you're selling data, you're really an ingredient. And your ingredient is only a piece of the overall solution. So we like to say we're selling high quality butter to chefs, and some of our chefs might be making like croissants with the data. Some of our chefs might be making steaks. Some of the people we sell butter to might not even be making anything with the butter. They might be using it for chemistry experiments or some other type of thing. So we're just an ingredient provider. And of course, just because you sell high quality butter to a pastry chef doesn't mean the end product is going to be amazing, right? You still need to have many other great ingredients and you need an amazing chef, right? In the end, it's the ingenuity of that person or that group of people that you're selling to, that really determines how good the end product is. And again, we're just an ingredient. Now, maybe having high quality butter is a necessary piece of having a great croissant. Maybe you can't have a great croissant, like a truly great croissant without high quality butter.
Yeah.
But there's so many other things that go into that. So it's really, really important. So if you think of different use cases, we have dozens and dozens of use cases. I mentioned one, which is like, where should I put my store? Very simple kind of use case, or where should I put my retail establishment? Another one can be like, what real estate should I buy or sell or manage in a different way? And that could be, apartment building complex or a office building or some other type of thing. If you stay on the retail, people actually use our data to figure out what store hours they should have. Maybe their current stores are at 7 a.m. Should they move them to 6:30 a.m. and get more market share? Should they move it to 7:30 and increase profitability, right?
Yeah.
So that's an example of something. We do a lot of stuff in logistics. So many of our customers are in logistics, kind of moving things around, delivering warehouses, understanding industrials, et cetera. And then we do a lot of stuff with just like basic local search. If you search for like restaurants near me, on most of the places you can search for that on the internet, that's Safegraph, or the kind of the underlying place for that data. So we have so many different use cases where people use our data. And I think I just mentioned 4 or so of maybe our 12 most common use cases that are out there. Again, there's a good and bad about being a data company. The good thing is you can sell to so many different folks. The bad is you can sell to so many different folks. So you may not have like a repeatable go-to-market motion.
Yeah, that's very exciting. I definitely want to dive deeper into those use cases. And I love that you mentioned you provide analogy. You're providing ingredients, the butter for the croissant. That makes me hungry. And I also make me think, what if the croissant, people don't want to eat croissant anymore, or the use cases are not important anymore? And as an ingredient provider, it's interesting that you mentioned you providing facts, but you don't do any analysis. So how do you know which facts are valuable? How do you pick those data to collect?
I mean, it's a good question. And again, you're right. We just pick facts, and some facts are more valuable than others, and some facts are certainly more valuable to different groups of folks. Yeah. So some of our customers value some of our facts and they don't buy certain other facts. So if you think of data is really simple. If you just think of it simply, it's just rows and columns, right? Yeah. So none of our customers buy all of our rows and all of our columns. You're usually going to buy a subset of the rows and a subset of the columns. So maybe you only operate in the US. Okay, so you certainly don't care about any of our data outside the US, right? Yeah. And we sell to major telcos in the US, but telco providers often in the US are very, very US centric. They don't care about what's going on in Brazil, for instance, or something. And and then even within that, they may care about, they may not care about industrials, or they may not care about parks, or they may not care about schools, or you may not care about retail, or whatever it might be. So again, those are the rows. And then of course you've got the columns. Those would be like basic attributes about a place. So imagine a place you could have things like store hours. You could have what the roof is made out of. You could have how many people go to this place. What's the credit card transactions, debit card transactions of a place. What's the shape of a place. So you get many, many, many different columns. And there's if you think of the number of rows, there's probably the same number of places as people worldwide. And there's maybe like 10,000 relevant columns, attributes about any given place. Our goal is to have all that one day. We're not close today, right? Our goal is to have, and so the hard part is figuring out, where do we invest? What other rows do we invest in? And of course, you're asking your customers all the time, I really want to expand into Russia. Okay, great. Okay, how's that? How much would you pay for that, et cetera? Or I really care about this particular attribute. I really want to know like the soil content under this place or something. Okay, great. That's interesting. Or I want to know the number of bathrooms in a place. Okay, how can we go do that? How can we go acquire that data, et cetera?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So it sounds like if we have those use cases, especially from the feedback from the customer, it's easier for us to determine what data is valuable. I'm curious, has there been any cases where nobody has requested that data set, but you think this is gold mine and you collected that data and then pitched to people, hey, maybe you want to take a look at that?
Yes. There are plenty of cases, and plenty of times when we've done that, we've been wrong. So it's a very humbling to kind of like predict the future. So sometimes we're correct. So sometimes we have an idea of the future. We do a ton of work, and it's very, very expensive to create this data and to put together this data. It takes a lot of time and effort to go do that. So it could cost you potentially more than $1 million to put together like a particular type of data set in terms of your time and your effort. And so and sometimes you're wrong. So you make a big bet on something and you spend a lot of money, you spend a lot of time. We're like, oh my gosh, no one cares about this data. I was wrong about that. Yeah. Sometimes you hit a gold mine, and sometimes you come up with something that is just so fundamental and people really want to buy it. It's a little bit easier to get to hear from your customers. Then you have a better sense of what's going on. If you have like 6 customers that say, I really need this data, I will pay for it. Here's how much I will pay for it. Yeah. Okay. All right. Now we're talking. Now we have a little bit more customer discovery. Now we're at a point today where that's much easier to do because we have a lot of customers, and a lot of our customers are big customers with really big budgets. A little bit easier to have those conversations today. When we started the company, we had less direct feedback that we could get, and we had to make bigger bets on things, and our bets had much lower hit rates as to how they panned out.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And do you have? Can you share an example? What is the example of a data set that you thought was important, but nobody wanted to purchase that?
Oh my gosh, I'm not sure I want to share because I'd be really embarrassed okay. by some of these things, but it does happen a lot. And you have an idea, maybe even you do some customer discovery or some potential customer discovery, and or people say that they want it, but then actually when you have it, nobody really wants to buy it, and so it's not that different from having features. So if you're a SaaS company, you want to add a new feature or something like that, it's very hard to know a priori, like what's important, what people really, really want, what they just kind of talk about, what they ask for. Or you hear a salesperson say, if you only had this product, I could sell it, or something like that. Is that really true, or is that just something the customer's saying? So it's often very, very, very difficult to know, and it's very, very humbling to do any type of technology company, whether you're doing data or whether you're doing services or whether you're doing a kind of a solution like a SaaS solution or something like that. Coming up with new products and new features is very humbling, and nobody has, even the best companies out there. If you think of like Google, their hit rate is like 25%. Or something, right? Even like, and they're probably one of the best companies ever created in the history of the world. So even an amazing company like that is often wrong. It's very, very, very difficult to know.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So when we think about geospatial data, for example, those restaurants, I wonder, do we have time as a factor? For example, how long customers stay in a location? I think if we add another dimension that can enrich the story we can tell.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. So if you think of data, is very simple. So data is usually about some sort of noun, and there's four main nouns that data is about. You have data about people, you have data about places. That's what Safegraph does. We focus on data about physical places. You have data about like kind of organizations, like a company data, and then you have data about products. So probably 95% of data is about one of those four things. You can cross them with each other. And so you can have different data sets that cross with each other. And then you can also cross them with time, as you mentioned, because a lot of data is temporal. And then you can cross them with price as well, right? And so temporal data is more valuable than non-temporal data because it's changing. People want to get the updates to changes and stuff like that. And so, if you think of data about a person, like certain data doesn't change that often. About a person or something that might be data we're all familiar with. So things like, even age might change a lot, but it's easily calculated, the change, right? Certainly your date of birth, the year you were born doesn't change, right? Things like gender don't change very often. Marital status don't change very often. Some of those things change, but they don't change very, very often. Things that change all the time, like every single day, so that could be like sales data. You mentioned foot traffic data, other types of data on a given place. That data can be really, really valuable because it has some sort of time component. Classic data, if you think about data of a company, would be a stock price. So a stock price would be like a price and a time and a organization component. And that price goes back a long time. If you think of like the AT&T stock data, will go back well over 100 years. Now, maybe 100 years ago, the tick was once per day. Now it's every 10th of a second. So you're having a different kind of version of time over time. But it's really valuable data. Anyone who's going to trade on AT&T stock and really any other types of stock is probably going to want that data going back in time, but also want it going forward in time as well.
Yeah, that's very exciting. So there's a use case that I think a lot about. I want to share with you to see what you think. So, for example, we have the footprint data, people going into a location. For example, we want to evaluate the popularity of a coffee shop. And from the data, and we can see a lot of people go into the coffee shop, but people maybe leave in a very short period of time. The story behind that, maybe the map is wrong, or the coffee shop, I don't know, is really ugly, has a weird smell inside, and people leave immediately. So if people just look at the number of visits, they might arrive at the conclusion, oh, this is a popular coffee shop. But when they look at the time or dig deeper into what is really going on behind the story, there might be something different. So when we provide those data to our customers or data scientists, all those time, location are correct. However, without a deeper understanding, the inference or the story they tell can be wrong. So there kind of is a gap. And Safegraph's role is fact checker. You mentioned you don't do much about insights. So if a data scientist have challenges in tell the right story from a right data, but there are some nuances in it, what is Safegraph's role? And do you help the data scientist to tell the right story in those type of edge cases?
Yes, yeah. So that's a really interesting use case. So first of all, we have a data product called Patterns, which is how busy a place is. If you ever see on the internet when a place is busy by time of day, if you ever see that not on Google, that's almost always the Safegraph data. So almost all those companies are our customers, and we do a lot of different types of stuff on patterns, like where do people generally come from, et cetera. And we'll have, as you mentioned, like roughly some sort of like understanding of foot traffic, high level popularity, and popularity by time of day, by time of week, by time of year, et cetera. But we also have an alternative to that, which is also like dwell time. So not only how long people are staying, but some sort of dwell time, and what's the median dwell time? What are some other types of, what are the 75th and 25th percentiles? of dwell time, et cetera, on a given place. How do these places compare to other types of places? And so you can literally see two Starbucks right across the street from each other with very, very, very different dynamics on all those different dimensions. At the same time, we have another product called Spend, and that's kind of aggregating data from things like credit cards, debit card transactions, and stuff like that. We can get a very, very similar view, right? So similar types of things, and you can get things like median transaction price, how many transactions there are, a whole bunch of other things. And again, same thing. You can literally see two Starbucks right across the street from each other, and one having completely, one literally doing like double the average transaction price than the other. It's really, really interesting. So it's interesting. The data is like really fun to explore. But you're right. Sometimes you need to dive in a little bit more, or sometimes there's an issue and stuff like that. And so we have a lot of our product and sales engineering time is listening to customers and potential customers. Hey, I don't understand this data. I don't understand what's going on. And sometimes they're pointing out a bug. It's like they don't understand something because like we messed up. Like, okay, whoa, we just messed up. We're going to go fix that thing, right? Because you can't be perfect when you have billions and billions of facts. You're going to make mistakes. Yeah. We have a bug in our system. We got to make that better. But oftentimes it's not a bug. It's just something interesting that they found. Right? Yeah. Here's interesting. Like, hey, these two Starbucks, they're literally across the street from each other, and they're very different. Yeah. That can't be true, right? They're right across the street. Actually, it is true. It's very, and here's why, here's what's going on. Here's what other customers have seen from this type of thing, et cetera. So it can be really, really fascinating to explore data because one of the things you do when you explore data is you're uncovering secrets. Yeah. Right? You're learning about all these new things that are happening in the world, and you're getting a deeper understanding of the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So it seems like you don't directly provide those stories and check what's going on in the back end. But if a customer encounter those challenges, you have sales engineers help them to do some deep dive.
And not just sales engineers, it could be our product people. Sometimes our actual engineers are on calls with them. Right? We want to hear from our customers and our potential customers. And when we have those discussions, that also gives us a lot of good ideas. So, oh wow, we should be doing this, or we should do this. Or sometimes, look, it's not just a fact, but there's a calculation on top of the fact. And if you can pre-calc it for your customer, you just save that customer 3 hours of time or something, right? And if we have 5 customers that all have the same pre-calc needs, we'll just pre-calc that particular thing. And then the other thing with data is just because you have the facts and just because you have the coverage, there's one more step, which is like, how do you get the data into your customer system so that they could use it?
Yeah.
So like if our customer uses Snowflake, we don't want to just give them like a big CSV and then they have to like upload it in Snowflake. Ideally, we could just push it directly into Snowflake so they can start using it immediately. If they use Databricks, same sort of thing. A lot of our customers use AWS, but some customers might use Azure or GCP. We should have an easy way for them to hook into it rather than require them to do engineering. We're selling into engineering teams, data science teams, machine learning teams. These people their time is extremely valuable. So how do we limit the amount of time that they need to do any type of data munging, and they can actually take that time instead, do like data exploration and actually do innovation on top of our data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And one thing you mentioned is very interesting, like two Starbucks across the street, they can have totally different behavior. And I can imagine maybe if there's the same company, they can compare two different stores. But if I have a restaurant and then there's another company owns another restaurant and I see something weird in my data set, I think because of the privacy of the customers, you cannot share the other restaurants' data for me to compare. I wonder, since you own all the data, do you calculate a certain type of geographic or industry average for customers to kind of as a safety net or fact check so they know they're not falling too far away from the average?
At Safegraph, we probably should do something like that. We don't have that particular thing. It's a good idea, and it's probably something we should do to give them a sense of what's going on. we do give them a lot of different core facts. We give our customers a lot of different core facts so they can understand things. We don't always normalize the facts per se, because once you get into the normalization game, we sell facts. Essentially, we sell truth. Once you get into normalization, you are in religion territory, right? And it's like, you're a Bayesian, I'm not a Bayesian. And in your belief, like the only way to go to heaven is to be a Bayesian or something. Somebody else may believe something very, very different about something. So you get a little bit in religion territory. So we try to give as many facts as possible so that people who have different religions around normalization can do it in different types of ways. And I would say even within our customers, they may have one data science group who does it one way, a different data science group to do another day. Especially, we sell a lot into financial services. They have many different ways of normalizing things. So we try to give them the core do, and even just basic stuff like this particular restaurant opened up in June of 2002, and it closed for business in May of 2021, right? Even just that type of thing, that's kind of a core data that you'll get from Safegraph. Even that, just like, how do you normalize that? How do you think about that? How do you know what's going on in the economy from different starts and stops and other types of things? You're just going to get a lot of different ways of people looking at it. And that's the innovator's job. Our job is to give them the facts so that they can do their job even better.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you mentioned core facts. Can you help me define what are core facts to you? Do you have any examples?
Well, anything that is true. So again, like store hours would be a core fact. It'd be really good to know maybe, how many bathrooms does a place have or something, right? We don't have that data today, but certainly that's the type of thing our customers may ask you for. Right, may ask us for. Today, another thing we don't have today is like what the roof is made out of. A lot of customers may care about that. So there's a lot of just core facts that people want to know. And there's as I mentioned, probably 10,000 relevant attributes about any given place. Today, we sell maybe 300, 400 attributes about a given place. So we have a ways to go. We have maybe a 3 to 4% of the attributes that are out there. So we have a ways to go to increase the number of attributes on any given place.
Yeah. And it's very interesting you mentioned the difference between truth and religion. You also talked about that in the DaaS Bible. So some example you mentioned, the FICO score is religion, or I can think of, I think the Zillow Zestimate probably also in a religion.
Great example of religion, yeah.
Right. So are there any cases where it's hard to differentiate truth and religion when you collect the data?
Yeah, sometimes it can be. We use machine learning to fill in holes in the data, right? And so sometimes you have to make some sort of prediction of the truth. We like to say at Safegraph, we predict the past. We're actually predicting the truth because you don't always know. You have holes in the data. And you could be wrong about something. Like, you could crawl one thing we do, we crawl the store hours of every McDonald's that are out there. Yeah. But the store hours usually say on Monday, we're open at this time, Tuesday, we're open at this time. But they don't usually say on Christmas, we're open on these times or something, right? Not usually, sometimes they do, but they don't usually say that like right on the website. So you have to make some sort of prediction, like the store hours might change during Christmas time. And so that's a truth type of thing that's out there. In the in the case of like the Zestimate on Zillow, there is the actual transaction price of the house. So this house sold in 2018 for $400,000, and it is and we got that data from the county, and it's extremely accurate data.
Yeah.
Then you have, okay, what is that house worth today, right? And, we may have some indications that maybe they did some improvements to the house. We may have some indications that the school system is a little bit better today than it was in 2018. We may have indications that a lot of people are moving to this area because it's very beautiful. And so we're going to say that this house, which was worth 400, it transacted $400,000 in 2018. We're going to say it's worth $550,000 today, right? And that is an estimate that may or may not be true, but that's the, and we're going to use a lot of different data to help us form that estimate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you have a lot of data sets. And as a data scientist, I know for myself, collecting data sometimes takes 90% of the entire workflow. So what does the workflow look like in Safegraph when you collect the raw data, fact check, and make it into a useful and a data set?
Well, first of all, you're right. So when we talk to most data scientists, they just spend a lot of time collecting data and a lot of time like munging the data because the data is super dirty and all that part of their job. When we talk to most data scientists, they don't like to do that. And it's actually for many data scientists, it's like 90% of their job is like data collection, data munging, data cleaning, and only 10% of their job is actually doing data science, which is what they love to do, right? We would love to flip it. It should be like 90% of your data scientists should be 90% of your job is doing the stuff that's like so interesting and fun and exciting and hard. And, that's what you wake up wanting to do in your data scientist. And like, hopefully companies like Safegraph can do like the boring other stuff, the cleaning, the finding, the getting you the quality data. So that is our goal. And our goal is to make everybody a lot more productive going to do that. And it's hard. And it's hard to do it at scale. So you really want to do it because you have to build a whole, and it's expensive. So that means you need a lot of clients to go, a client might pay us X dollars for a particular piece of data. That data almost invariably costs 20X for us to make. So we need to get at least 20 clients just to break even on this particular data. And then, we start making money over time. And so for any one client, it would be incredibly difficult to go do that. Because again, they can pay us 5% of the cost of going to do the data. Plus they may not even have time to go do that. But then of course you really want to get better and better and better over time. Doing data is a lot like peeling an onion, where you have these like series of 1% improvements. And we all know 1% improvements is you double, right? You get twice as good, but it's just a lot of these little things and a lot of this little error here, and you're changing this thing here, and you're just making it just a little bit better. And a lot of that comes from feedback, from hard work, from being wrong a lot, from having people to tell you wrong or discovering things. You just get a little bit better over time.
Yeah. And I know you have a lot of geospatial data, but you also have other type of data like transactions. And now we also talk about time. So when you build the data infrastructure, the data engineering pipeline, do you try to have a kind of central standard pipeline rules to fit everything in a kind of a general schema, or it's a case by case?
Well, at Safegraph, at least we have a framework where we everything in Safegraph is about a physical place. So in the end, it's all about a physical place, and we use and so one of the things that you want to have in a data company is some sort of join key where you can join the data easily. Yeah. We use a publicly available join key called place key that we're involved with, but a lot of other great engineering teams are involved with, which is a very simple way of taking, let's say, an address or a fraction of an address, 555 North Main Street, Suite 904, and you can have street or STR, and you can have North or N dot, and you could have Suite 504, number 504, and taking this like very, very complex string that can have many, many permutations, and moving that into a string which is simple and where everything will resolve into the same sort of string, where you can do really, really, really easy matching. You want some sort of way of identifying and being able to join data easily, and you want some sort of framework. So if you're having data on organizations, you want some sort of way of like basically resolving, McDonald's Inc., McDonald's with an apostrophe S, McDonald's with no S, they all have to resolve into the same entity, McDonald's.com, et cetera. The ticker symbol for McDonald's, they all have to resolve to the same kind of entity ID, so that you can easily kind of do that. So once you know what your thing is, your noun is that you're going to have data on, in our case, our noun is a physical place, then you can really focus everything on that. So every single data point at Safegraph all, we have this thing, we live off this place key. Every single thing has a place key attached to it because it's all about a physical place. Let's say, a McDonald's on 555 Main Street, and then that data lives off of it. And so that's the row. The row is that, let's say, a place key or some sort of core entity. And then you have lots of different columns that are coming off of that data. And again, you could have potentially thousands and thousands of columns on any given row that people might want to pull data. But for each column, you may have a very, very different pipeline of how you get the column, where you get that column from, how you resolve it, how do you do that? And so you want to have some sort of standardization on the rows, but each column might be very, very, very different. You may have a very, very different team. In our case, that's kind of how we divide our kind of both our engineering and our product teams. So really a lot of it's on core different types of columns. And you're going to maybe have a very, very, very different team with very different skill set who are going to be essentially manufacturing data about those columns.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So what is the most challenging part in collecting data, and how did you tackle those challenges?
Well, I would say the most challenging part about being a data company, et cetera, I think collection is very hard, and manufacturing and all the things that we do, it's very, very technically difficult to do. But the more difficult is actually marketing it to your customers, because again, you're just an ingredient. And a lot of times people, maybe unlike butter, I use the butter analogy a lot, but unlike butter, people may not even know that they need it. Right. Probably anyone who's making if you're making a croissant, you probably know you need butter. Butter is kind of an important ingredient if you're making a croissant. But unless you're making a vegan croissant, then you maybe need cashew butter or something, right? But in our case, we are selling data. Not everyone understands it. Now understands why they need it. They may not understand why different quality is important about it. So one of the things that we do at Safegraph, and we try to do a better and better job at Safegraph, is really trying to be very, very transparent about the data. At a data company, I think transparency is way more important than at an application company. If you're running a general SaaS company, transparency it's okay, but I don't think it's the most important thing in your selling motion that's out there. In a data company, it's definitely top 5 most important things you can do is really be transparent. So one thing is being transparent. It's like, what data do you have? So, it would make sense that you would publish your schema, right? If you have data, you should publish your schema that's out there. You would be surprised. Most data companies do not even publish their schema. So you don't even know what they sell. Yeah. Another thing, okay. Well, if you think of your fill rates on different things on your schema is going to be different. In some cases, your fill rate might be 100%. In some cases, your fill rate might be 10% or something like that. Well, maybe you should publish your fill rates. Almost no data companies publish their fill rates, right? So really trying to be, now here's where it really starts to get interesting in transparency. Do you publish your bugs, right? You say, hey, here's all the areas we had problems with last month that we had bugs, which we fixed it, or we still have bugs that we haven't fixed. So at Safegraph, we publish our bugs. We try to say, look, here's all of our problems. Here's all the other things that we're working on. Because who do we sell to? We sell to data scientists. Data scientists, they like transparency. Yeah. They like kind of diving into particular things. So depending on who you market to, you may want to change your thing. But I think for most data companies, that would benefit from being a lot more transparent. At Safegraph, I think we're probably one of the most transparent companies out there, but I'd say we're still only a 7 out of 10. And I want to try to figure out, how do we get to a 9 out of 10? How do we get to a 10 out of 10? How do we really push the envelope of like maybe even making our product roadmap transparent, or a whole bunch of other types of things you can make transparent for your customers and your potential customers?
Yeah, that's a great point, because as a data scientist, I know there are never going to be a perfect analysis, perfect data set. So if you're transparent about your mistakes, that definitely have earned more of my trust. And if a company doesn't talk about their mistakes at all, it doesn't mean they don't make any mistakes, but it's also like it's unknown, right?
Yeah. Another thing is just not being hyperbolic about your data. But a lot of companies be like, we're 99.99% accurate or something like that. Like, I mean, I'd say we're definitely not 99.99%. Like, that is like so impossible to go do. And So a lot of companies, like, they will say those things and no one believes it. Everyone knows that's not true, right?
Yeah.
And so, so we're really just trying to be really truthful about your data, about what's going on, and not and saying, look, we're just trying to make it better. We're making it better every single day. We're really focused on making it better, and we care deeply about making it better. And if you find something that's wrong, we love that. We're not going to argue with. We're gonna take that in, and we're going to use that to make it even better. So the next month, when you get the new delivery of our product, the new release we're releasing every week or every month or whatever we're releasing, or whatever cycle we're releasing at, you're just going to get a much, much better solution every single month or every week.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned you want to get to a 10 from where you're at right now. And you mentioned one example is sharing your product roadmap. Are there something else specific you think that can help you to get to a 10?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of different things that one can do on the transparency side. So really trying to understand, how do you know this is accurate? Really trying to understand, sometimes it's hard to be like 100% transparent because there might be some secrets in your company that you don't want to give to competitors or whatever else it might be that's out there. So you have to weigh all those things in. But I think maybe companies are just trying to, like, maybe I've been wrong too in the past. Maybe we're all trying to be like too secretive about everything. And actually maybe we should just go a lot further with just really opening up the kimono to your customers, especially if you're proud. Like, this is hard to do. And as data scientists, which are our core customers, as they learn more about Safegraph, they get really excited about it. And sometimes just sharing the problems. Okay, here's a problem, or we ran into the scaling solution, and they're like, oh, well, okay, I've run into those types of scaling solutions. Like, I understand this is an issue. Like, you're ingesting like billions and billions of hundreds of billions of facts, and you're trying to like munge them all and do this thing. It's like, oh, we had this, So maybe being a little bit more transparent about like the issues that you're running into or the other things that are happening, and also where it's not working. So one of the things that, like, we have data that, for particular use cases works really well. If you think of these rows and columns, it works really well for this one use case. This other one, we've seen like 6 customers try it for this other use case and it doesn't work. The data science models have shown no lift. Maybe we should actually publish that. Hey, we've had 6 different folks try this particular thing with our data, and guess what? All of them have found it doesn't work. It doesn't mean it doesn't work. But it does mean that 6 very, very smart data science team has tried to make it work and they have failed. So maybe you shouldn't use our data for that particular thing. And no customer does that. No company does that. But that's something that we're thinking about. Maybe we should be much more open about, like, when somebody tried to do something with their data and it doesn't work. And then, of course, you're always open about the stuff that does work, right? Everyone writes case studies about all the things that do work. But those case studies are a lot more believable when you couple it with here's all the problems that we had as well when we tried other things that didn't work.
Thanks for sharing that. So are you personally involved in those sales conversations?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, we're still a startup. So the CEO does everything in a startup.
Yeah, I'm asking because as a data scientist, sometimes it feels like we need to do some sales and marketing for our projects, for our models. And when we need to pitch to the stakeholders to invest in the project, to use our model. So I'm curious, when you pitch the data to a customer, how do you go about it? To say, for example, maybe we do a role play. I'm a customer, I'm a restaurant, but I don't see the value of the data. How are you going to convince me?
Well, first of all, not everyone should buy the data. So it's important that you don't convince. So we've had scenarios where we convince people to buy our data and it wasn't useful to them. That is a bad scenario, right? Where we make money, selling a company is actually pretty expensive for us to do this time to sell into a company and then to service that company. The only way we make money is if that company becomes a long-term customer. They keep renewing for many, many years. So if that company gets our data and then doesn't find it valuable and then churns, that is a huge, huge loss for Safegraph. So we do not want to sell into a company that doesn't need it. So really what we're trying to do is align And by the way, we've done it before. We've sold into companies and they don't need our data. And I've done it personally, and that's a mistake. That is a giant mistake that we've learned from. You do not want to push something onto a customer that they're not going to benefit. So really, we want to align. Like, let's figure this out together, whether this is going to go work for them. And by the way, if the customer, even if you know it's going to work and the customer doesn't think it's going to work, it's not going to work because the customer's not going to really push it and implement it. You can't push a company to go do something that they're not like aligned to do. So there's a mutual discovery in any type of sales process. Isn't about pushing something on to somebody, right? We're not building a one-off transaction here and then I'm going to move on. A sales process is really about mutually, let's figure this out together. We have some expertise because we sell into a lot of data science teams. We see a lot of different people doing this. So but you have expertise because your company. Your company is a little bit of a snowflake. It's an individual type of thing. Let's figure this out together. Let's see if it makes sense. Maybe there's an obvious thing it makes sense. Maybe it's obvious it doesn't. Often we're in some sort of gray zone and we need to navigate it. Maybe there's some other thing. Maybe you don't. Maybe we have a self-serve where you can buy, $800 worth of data instead of coming to our enterprise. Maybe you should just use the self-serve for a while, for maybe even for 6 months, and then if that's really working well, then we can upgrade to another system. But it's really important that you're not pushing stuff onto. That's a great way to get a really bad company because you're just going to have tons of churn. And churn kills any type of enterprise companies.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks for sharing that. So you talk about alignment. How do you find alignment with your customer?
Well, I mean, it's really making sure that you're getting something that they're going to benefit from and use, right? And then continually to delight them. One of the ways to continually delight a customer and this is true not just for data companies like Safegraph, but also for any type of product company, is having some sort of high product velocity. So how much are you changing the product for the better? How much are you improving that product over time? So in our case, like in many cases of SaaS company, you let's say you buy, in our case, most of our customers pay a yearly fee. Right. So they're signing on for some sort of yearly service. They pay X dollars a year for some sort of data feed from us. And so they get they buy in February and now it's June. Is the product much better in June than they bought in February? Now they're delighted. They got like all this product improvement at the same price. Right. And imagine it's like one of the cool things about buying a Tesla is they do all this, they do over the air updates and your car actually gets better over time. So you bought this car in June and now it's December. The car is actually better. Maybe it's only marginally better, but it's kind of cool. Like, whereas when you maybe buy most other cars, 6 months later, it's the same, or maybe it's a little bit worse because there's some more wear and tear on the car or some other type of thing. Like it hasn't actually improved. The more you can improve the product over time, the more the customer gets delighted. Again, if you're doing even these 1% improvements, they add up really, really, really fast. And that 1% improvement, it's also hard to measure because the 1% improvement might be a 0% improvement for 90% of your customers. But for 10% of your customers, that 1% improvement is like a 25% improvement, right? Yeah. Because it really changes the game. It really makes things much, much better. So doing these series of improvements really can change. And so really focusing on making your product better every single day is going to go a really long way with your customer. It's going to make them love you more. But also they're going to, and then one of the other things you can do, and this goes back to be transparent, is maybe you can go back in time and you can show all the releases. Let's say you have a monthly release cadence. How did our product change over? How did our product change over time in the last month? And then they can see, okay, wow, there's this trajectory of change. Well, that's probably a good predictor of the future trajectory of change. Yeah. If you buy a product that hasn't changed in 3 years, there's a very high likelihood it won't change in the next year, right? Yeah. So how is that change? How has that change happened? The past performance is not a perfect predictor of future performance, but it is a predictor.
Yeah, that's a great point. And previously, you mentioned something that I thought was very interesting. You mentioned for a data set, there are 6 data scientists looking into that, but didn't find anything. And then maybe you could share that with other customers. So basically, this is kind of like a crowdsourcing. I understand you're running it as a company, but have you thought about it kind of publish maybe not the entire data set, but like a small subset of data set, kind of like Kaggle, and use crowdsource for data scientists to, learn, to play with it, and then gather insights from it?
We haven't done that, but it's a good idea. So maybe it's something that we should do. Yeah, it's a really good idea. One of the problems with running a company is, and this is something I struggle with as a CEO, is there's a lot of good ideas out there. And this is a good example of one that like maybe we should do. And we have a lot of smart people at our company that are constantly coming up with the good ideas. And we can do like, and we can come up with like 40 good ideas, and we can do like 2 of them or something, because we only have the ability to do so many. So part of it is just figuring out, okay, what new ideas should we add? And one of the things that I have, where I could do a better job of a CEO is really being more focused about what we do. And one of the things that I think I've done, one of the things where I messed up in the past, both at Safegraph, but also other companies that I've been out in the past, is just trying to do too many things at once. And then you often are not going to be great at any one of those things. And you're going to have maybe a bunch of things that are okay, some things that are mediocre, some things that just fall flat. Rather than picking like the 1 or 2 things you really, really are going to just do an incredible job of and be world-class at.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So what is your principles when you evaluate good ideas? What are some, mental models within Safegraph when you consider where to invest in projects?
Well, it's a good question, and it's very hard to figure out because as we mentioned in data, a lot of data is really about these series of 1% improvements. And you really have to focus on that, and you have to constantly be working on that. But of course, if you only do that, you're only going to grow at a certain rate. So you do have to do some things that are a little bit more step function oriented as well. And all good companies, let's say all great companies, have they do both a series of these 1% improvements, and they do these step functions. And that could be both on their product, but also maybe on their go-to-market motions or other types of motions that are out there, or even it could be an HR thing that they're doing, et cetera. So you need both. And the thing with the 1% improvements is they have a very high likelihood of success. So they're it's very intoxicating to go do that. And the thing with the step functions is they have a very, very low likelihood of success. Right. In the series of 1% improvements, there's usually 50 other companies that have done the same thing. And let's say you're improving your go-to-market motion, and you're trying to make your sales team more efficient or something like that. There's all these companies out there that you can learn from. There's all these books, there's all these blogs, there's all these other types of things that are out there. In the step function, there's usually 0 other things you can learn from. You have to make some sort of guess, and you have to go do that. But the step function can 2x to 100x your business. And so they have, so if you don't do any step functions at all, you can have a problem. But if you're doing too many step functions at any given time, you are almost certainly going to fail at all of them. So you do need to calibrate how you're making these investments, and it's very, very, very difficult to go do. No one does it great. Maybe the best you can get is good. And even companies like Google and Amazon, like most of their step functions fail, but they still continually do step functions.
So I think the investment in people is also very important. So I'm curious about some career advice and hiring in Safegraph. So I interviewed Nick Singh on this podcast, and we talk about acing the data science interview, a book he wrote. And he told me a story that he sent you a cold email asking for an opportunity, and then you let him do marketing for Safegraph. Even though he didn't have much experience, he was doing a growth engineer at Facebook. So do you remember, how did you make that decision?
I think often people have different talents in different areas, and sometimes they put themselves in a box, but they're maybe they have talents beyond that box.
Yeah.
And so, in his particular case, he was an engineer, and he was a relatively young engineer. He had studied computer science in college. He was an engineer at Facebook, and so he kind of put himself on the engineering box, and that's a great box to be in. That's a very very exciting place to be, but engineers can do many other things in life too.
Yeah.
In his particular case, we thought maybe he could do things in marketing. The person who runs product for us at Safegraph, her name is Lauren Spiegel. She's a very very interesting person. She started her career as a lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
and she became a partner in a law firm. Then one day, she decided she wanted to be an engineer. So she quit her extremely high paying job at a law firm and went to coding school and then became a software engineer. Then she applied to Safegraph as a software engineer. She was already a pretty accomplished software engineer, but we thought she might be better in product. So we said, hey, why don't you try this product thing? And then nowadays she runs all of our product org at the company. So you can see just a very kind of winding career path. And that's true of most people. When you start to like really dive into most people, let's say you take the average, maybe not true for someone who's like 23 years old or something, but as people move on their career path is a little bit windy, very unpredictable. They're going in different directions. They're learning from different types of things. Even though she was, like in her case, she was a great lawyer, but she had other passions that she wanted to pursue as well. So people also, as they get older or as they change, they might want to do different things. All that's possibility. And just putting someone in a box for their entire lifetime based on the major that they decided when they were 19 years old, that seems a little odd to me.
Yeah. And on your Twitter, I think you mentioned you're a lover of weirdos. So what is a weirdo to you?
Oh, well, I do think sometimes there's too much of putting convention is often overrated. And so, a lot of conventional things, to be completely conventional or to have more conventional views, it allows you to get along with people quite well. And it can be important in life. But I have always gravitated to people that are a little bit weirdo. They're maybe they're socially awkward, or they have a very, very different view about a particular thing, or they've just tried different things. So they have a traditional resume or something like that. It's nice and sometimes refreshing to see that. Now, again, if they're too weird, then maybe they just can't work in an organization and stuff like that. So there's always a balance between the two. But in a lot of organizations, it's just like very, very, very conventional and not enough weird.
Yeah. And what is the most unconventional hiring decision you've ever made?
One thing is, maybe flip it around a bit. One thing is when you have someone who's really doing well in your company, like, how do you keep them motivated?
Yeah.
So how do you keep giving them new and exciting products and new exciting projects and stuff like that? When I was at LiveRamp, we hired this person named Annika Gupta as a software engineer. She's a very, very talented person, but you could tell she was going places even when she was 22 years. We hired her right out of college when she was 22 years old. And quickly we decided she should run marketing. And she's like, "Oh, I've never run marketing before. I don't even know what marketing is." It's like, well, you're a smart person and go run marketing. And then we decided she should move into product. Then we said she should run product, and then she should run engineering. And then, and so you want to make sure when you find super talented people, you can grow with them. And it's a little bit weird in her case. I think she was running like hundreds of people when she was like 28 years old or something like that. And that's odd. And she's managing people that are 20 years plus older than her. And that's odd and that's weird. But if you find a snowflake like that, who's that type of person, you kind of have to roll with it. And yeah, it is a little different. It is a little weird to be managing people that are, 20 years your senior and stuff like that. But if you find a super talented person, and in her case, I think she's one of the more talented people I've ever met, then you have to kind of grow with those people.
Yeah. So how do you identify the potential of someone on your team or when you hire someone?
That I haven't figured out. So if you really want to identify like the 10Xers, I don't know. I have never been able to predict a 10Xer before working with them.
Yeah.
And now after working with someone for a while, you could know for sure if they're a 10Xer, and everyone around them often can know very, very quickly whether they're a 10Xer. While interviewing them, I don't know. I'm sure there may be a way to do it, but I haven't figured. If someone figures that out, please email me or hit me up on Twitter at @Auren or something like that. I would love to know the different secrets to figure out a 10Xer before actually working with them.
Yeah. So the experience of working together is how you decide whether you want to grow someone.
Yeah. And by the way, people can change. So they could be a 10Xer in a current role. You move them to a new role. They could be a 10Xer right now in their life. And then the other priorities happen in their life and work isn't as important to them. So, there's lots of, there are things. You can meet someone who's not even good for your company. You could fire someone from your company. They could turn out to be a 10Xer in another company because they're going to be better fit for that particular organization. So just because they're a 10Xer somewhere else does not mean they're 10Xer with you. Just because they were terrible somewhere else does not mean that, right? So you have all these different types of things that are very, very, very difficult to predict.
Yeah. And what was the most difficult decision when you had to fire someone?
Well, I think there's lots of different frameworks in firing. And if you think of fire, maybe if you think of there's probably like 3 axes. So there's like, let's say, so you have 2 to the third or 8 boxes that maybe someone, if you really simplify it, could be, and so you have one is like, are they producing, right? Yes or no. Are they producing? And then the second axis is, are they putting in like the effort essentially to produce? Yes or no. And you could have people in all those different boxes. And then the third axis, I would say, is, are they a good person? Are they ethical? Are they the right cultural fit? Right? Yes or no? Kind of like that type of thing, right? And so everyone could be in every different box that's out there. And of course, someone's not producing, they're not putting in the effort, they're not a good cultural fit, they're not an ethical person. Okay, that's an easy fire, right?
Yeah.
The problem starts to be is when they start to go in some of these other boxes that are out there. So let's say somebody is producing but not really putting in like the right effort to go do that. Okay, well, you probably don't want to fire them. They're producing, they're a good cultural fit. They're just not putting the effort. They're producing. You want to work with them. Okay, but now let's say 6 months later, they're still not putting in the effort. They're a good cultural fit. They're a good ethical person, but now they're no longer producing. They were producing before. For let's say a salesperson or something, right? And now they're no longer producing. Okay, now what do you do? Okay, you have some history of them producing. So this is it's not like they've never produced. They've produced before, but they never really put in the right effort. They weren't actually doing the right things that are out there. Okay, so that's a tough decision. Then the opposite, they're putting in the effort. They're a cultural fit. They're an ethical person. But they're not hitting. They're not producing.
Yeah.
What do you do, right? And in that case, I would say a lot of times you should invest in that person more. Maybe you should move them to a slightly different job. Maybe you move them to a different manager. Maybe you change the role a bit or something like that, right? So, but these are very, very, very difficult questions. And at a startup, you're just going to have a lower tolerance for people that aren't producing than at a larger company where you may have a little bit longer lead time to how to invest in those people, et cetera.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And if you were to mentor someone, especially someone who is a data scientist or engineer, what's your best advice for them?
If you're going to mentor someone who's a data science or engineer, well, one of the things is, I think in general, I don't think it's really just true for data science engineers. It's probably true for anyone. It's really trying to figure out your superpower and really trying to be great at a small number of things rather than be good at lots of things, right? So, I would try to be like the best of class in something rather than being like okay at a bunch of different types of things. And it's pretty easy to be the best at something. You just have to pick the right join. And so, let's say you care about, let's say you're a software engineer and you're really into sharks or something, right? Okay. Well, maybe you are not the best person who knows the most about sharks and maybe you're not the best software engineer, but the combo of the two, you're the best software engineer who knows a lot about sharks. And then you could take all these different things about how sharks swim and how they communicate and how they attack different things and all of it, and you could use that in your software. And then you could take all your things about learning from software and you could use that for, different marine studies of sharks or something. And you could be the best at the overlap of those two things. That's a relatively easy thing to become the best at, right? In some way, right? Yeah. And so thinking about your things in that way, and then also, it can change. So just because you're the best at something doesn't mean that's the only thing you're going to do for the rest of your life. You can slowly expand. You could find other things that you're interested in. You can move around a little bit, et cetera. But there is a huge rents that go to being in, the top, certainly the top 100 people, and oftentimes the top 10 people in a given particular area.
Yeah. What is your superpower?
It's very, very hard to know. It's very, very hard to talk about yourself in those particular ways. So I think I'm a little bit better about generalizing, giving advice for others than to finding things particular about myself. You may have to ask my colleagues or my wife.
Yeah. What do you guess? What do you think they think about your superpower?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to ask him and get back to you. I think it's a way of avoiding the question.
Yeah. That's okay. So before we wrap up, what is the future of Safegraph, or how does Safegraph play into the future of data science?
Well, having independent data companies is really important. And so, you could see a world that exists where there's a very, very small number of companies that own all the data. Let's say 12 companies that own all the data. They have a monopoly on that data. And that's a world where you're just going to have a lot less innovation because you only have 12 companies really competing to innovate. And then you're going to see like most of the rents to that innovation accrue to those 12 companies. And that's a world that nobody wants to live in, including the people that work at those 12 companies, right? Literally nobody wants that world. Or you could see a world where you're going to have these independent data companies. If data is the building block for innovation, then you really want to have truly independent data companies that will sell to anyone. They're not going to sign an exclusive. At Safegraph, we'll never sign an exclusive deal. It's not like some insurance company could come to us and say, you can't, I'll pay you all this money, but you can't sell it to my competitors. We will never do a deal like that.
Yeah.
We want to sell to everybody. We want to be open to everybody to come to us. And just like Wikipedia, anyone can go to Wikipedia and get access to it. You imagine a scenario where they wouldn't allow a certain class of people or something like that to go to Wikipedia. You want to be able to have everyone have access to truth, and then they can build on top of it. So having these kind of like core data infrastructure is really important. And I think for our society to really, really advance as a society, we need way more access to data than we have today. Data is way too closed on every single level. And obviously there are companies like Safegraph that sell data. We need more companies like that are going out there and manufacturing high quality data. But there's lots of companies and organizations and governments that have access to data, and they need to get it out there. We need to have more data out there, and it needs to be more open so we can have for instance, medical data. We should have, there's this trope that we can't release medical data out there because it's very, very private and sensitive data, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, if you did release the raw underlying data, this would be really problematic. I don't want people seeing my raw medical data that's out there. But there is a way to protect privacy and to have access to data. You can have your cake and eat it too. There's lots of things we can do with differential privacy. We can do things. We can perturb the data. We can create synthetic data on top of data. We can allow data to just be queried in a certain way, et cetera. So people can ask deep questions of the data without having to necessarily see the underlying actual data that's out there. And that's a way we could massively we could have people live longer. People could live healthier. People could be happier. We could spend less money on it. If you can imagine all these different types of things that we could be doing if we just opened up data a bit more. And I think it's a human right to have more access to data. It's one of the most important things that we could be working on as a society. if this data was open, we would massively increase innovation and massively increase happiness and general welfare in our world. Safegraph is doing one small little piece of it, but I would love to see every company, every organization, every government really focus on getting data out there more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very exciting future. And now with the rise of decentralized applications, do you think there's going to be a decentralized DaaS company, or do you think part of the data set can be beneficial if it's running on the decentralized platform?
I do. Yeah. I think we'll see a lot of those types of things. I think they're really exciting. One of the nice things about having some sort of decentralized ledger that's out there is that anyone can get access to it, and that it's and that it goes back for a really long period of time. You could see the Bitcoin transactions, for instance, since the start of Bitcoin. Every single transaction that happened, every single thing that happened, it's available to anybody. Some, maybe it's cleaner and you might want to pay for the data because it's better or cleaner or something like that. But it's definitely, data doesn't have to be free. Having open data does not mean data has to be free. Obviously, Safegraph's a data company. We sell data, and there's companies that sell, data about public ledgers and stuff like that. The data doesn't have to be free. It just has to be available at a fair price, right? If you charge a gazillion dollars for data, it's not really available. And so it needs to be available at a reasonable price that's out there. But it's okay for people to charge for something so that they can continue to make it better, right? And having this decentralized data doesn't mean it has to be free. The data out there is free. But what it is exciting that it's out there, and it's all. I mean, like understanding some sort of chain transactions going back now like 10 years or so for Bitcoin is really, really interesting and really exciting.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think there's going to be a lot of decentralized data provider, and there definitely are use cases for it. But also, I don't believe everything needs to be decentralized. So what is the benefit of having a central data provider, having certain governance?
Yeah, well, decentralization has benefits and it has drawbacks, right? And so does centralization. And so in certain applications, it's better to be a little bit more centralized. In certain applications, it might be better to be decentralized. Decentralized is slower and much more expensive, right? And so that is a huge drawback. It just takes way more expense to go do it in terms of compute power, or in terms of whatever it might be, and just things are just going to move at a much slower rate because it's decentralized. At the same time, it's way more trustworthy because it's decentralized. It's way more easier to there may be more incentives to get it going. You can give everyone a coin or something like that, right? And so you can give some, so you might be able to get adoption faster. So there's lots of pluses and minuses of centralization versus decentralization. And I think every different use case is different. And you could have multiple competing use cases in a particular type of way. So I think it's okay for lots of different, I don't think, it's like always a nail and a hammer. I think it's okay to have many different things, but for sure, we're going to see a lot of very successful centralized systems, and for sure we're going to see a lot of successful decentralized systems, and a lot of things are going to be more hybrid, where they're going to be centralized in some areas, decentralized, and so even a lot of the a lot of the crypto projects, there can be pretty centralized in certain areas, right? There might be like 6 miners or something. That's pretty centralized and pretty concentrated, even though it's like quote unquote decentralized. There's like 6 companies do 60% of the mining or something, right? So you can always have these different types of things, and I think there's pluses and minuses for all of it.
Yeah. And what is something you're excited about in your career or in your life?
I'm very, very excited for the future of data, and I think we are just at the cusp of really starting to understand like secrets of humanity. We're understanding like, what is love? What is family? Why do we do things that we do? How do we live much longer? How do we be happier? How do we have better society? How do we govern ourselves better? all of these things are things that we can learn from data. We can learn from things in the past. We can learn from facts, and we can extrapolate. And so part of the hard part is getting these facts in one place, being able to govern the usage of those facts, being able to really kind of analyze that. And we are at maybe 1% of where we will be. But I'm very, very bullish to see where that goes over the next couple of decades. It is going to be awesome once it happens in the right way. We're going to have some fits and starts, and there will be some problems, but we have an ability to really, really, really make the future much better than the past.
Yeah. So for people who want to find you online or learn more from you, where can they find you?
I'm a prolific tweeter, so you can come follow me at Auren, Auren, on Twitter. That will link to my blog and Substack, and obviously you can go to safegraph.com. But Twitter is the first place. I love Twitter. I probably love it way more than I should. I probably spend way more time on there than I should. So please come follow me. Ask me if you ask me something on Twitter, I will respond.
Mm-hmm. And you also host a podcast. Do you want to share a little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for people who are like data nerds, data scientists, they care about data and data businesses, I host a podcast called World of DaaS, DaaS, and where we try to really dive into very, very, very specific types of data businesses, and we dissect those businesses, or we talk about different academic research or other types of research that are dealing with core data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Thank you so much, Auren, for coming to the show. And I'm very excited to see more data sets published by Safegraph.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm really excited to be here. It's really fun.